We are honored to have some of Chuck's friends and fellow bandmates on the show, and who better to share some of their memories of Chuck than Mr. Rick Raz. Thanks for being on the show tonight, Rick.
Thanks for having me, Jed. It's great to be here.
Now, Rick, what can you tell us about the early days of Death and working with Chuck?
Well, to start off, we met at a party, so we were more or less friends before any kind of bandmate kind of thing, and I was friends jamming in the garage. We all dropped out of high school together and just spent a week, basically 7 days a week in the garage writing songs, doing little covers here and there, just influences, and just building whatever we were building.
When you first started out with him, right, because you were there for really the early parts of Death, what was his, as he tried to relate to you guys, his bandmates, what was he trying, what was his goal with his band? Do you know? I mean, did he ever mention, what he really wanted to do?
That wasn't really it was nothing like that in the beginning. It was a team effort. There was nobody was saying how anything was going to go. We were just writing parts and putting parts together, and there was nothing like that at all. It was really smooth, and there was nobody in control. It was pretty much the three of us, and we were running the whole thing together. Nobody was above anyone.
And what about the recording processes back then? A little different than now?
Just as far as recording, as far as an 8
recording, you guys all going in and recording and stuff. I mean, now it would be pretty antiquated, but I mean, like you guys, like when Leprosy and stuff like that, when you were doing that kind of stuff?
Well, definitely a lot different. It was all analog, so you were cutting tape, and you really couldn't do all the type of editing that you could do now. That saves a lot of time. It was really, really time consuming, so you couldn't make it sound, which I thought was cool, making it as raw as possible. That's the way it comes out is what you get. You know what I mean? So, but nowadays you can fix all that and make it sound all pretty, and now pretty much, it's the live. To me now, it's the live thing. If a band's going to represent, you really got to see a band live, and if they can represent live as well as recording, then it's all good.
I don't want to get too morbid, but I mean, when you heard of his passing, I'm sure it was a big shock to like the metal community down there in Florida. I mean, you were down in Florida, when all this was going on. I mean, was it just like a big, unbelievable thing that, that somebody so relevant to this industry?
Yeah, it was really odd because I actually ran into Chuck. I was playing in a band called Flow, and we used to hang out at this place called The Station in Fern Park, and Chuck just happened to come out one evening.
I know where it is, yep.
I saw him walking up, and we spent about 4 hours chit-chatting that evening. He told me all about his occurrence, his surgery, and we pretty much made our peace. I mean, it was really, really cool. We hung out for a long time and chit-chatted, had a few drinks, blah, blah, blah. And then I ran into his sister, and she had told me that he had a relapse. So, and it was inoperable. So pretty much, she told me pretty much the whole story, how he wanted to go home. And when they pulled into the driveway, that he had a big smile on his face, and he passed in his home where he wanted to be. So that was really odd. When I saw her, I was like, I just saw him.
Wow, that is...
standing there, we were talking, we went into the bar, literally for 4 hours, we just sat there and chit-chatted about you name it, we talked about it. And it was just like when we first met at like a backyard party in like 1982, late 82. We were just hanging out chit-chatting, so it was odd. It definitely really odd and shocking because it was a non-cancerous thing. It was just growth, and they couldn't operate on it, and he just pretty much had to lay there until it shut his body down. And that's pretty deep stuff, let alone in front of your family in your home.
It is, but at least for you personally, you got to talk to him before that happened, and you left. Everybody was
oddity. That was really odd. I thought about that. I was like, man, we ran into each other that night, and we spent all that time talking, and ran into his sister and heard the story, and it was really mind-boggling because I never got to see him again after that. So
it's like a divine intervention almost, that you were able to clear the air, and everybody was, No,
it was kind of a blessing the way that happened, to be honest with you. So
definitely
happy that happened.
Did you ever think that Death would be so big and leave such a mark on the music industry when you guys were doing it back in the garage?
No, we weren't doing it. We weren't doing it for that. We weren't doing that when we put out records.
Right.
And he continued his, his saga of Death, and however he wanted to do it. It was his band.
Right.
So at that time, it became his band. Like I said in the beginning, it really wasn't anybody's band.
Right. It was all you guys together. Just doing your thing.
The drummer sang 80-90% of the tunes back then. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Chuck sang like 2 or 3 songs, but people evolve and people move on, and
sure,
people are left behind. But that's just the way it works.
That's
There's no reason
sure.
to be full or angry with people. That's the way it happens. You know what I mean?
Does it all over the place? That's
exactly.
That's not in this industry.
Up your thing.
Yep.
Exactly.
But I mean, in today, it's 2011, and death is still such a huge thing. Does it just, kind of boggle you a little bit? Like, I mean, it's a great thing.
Pretty cool in a way. Just in general, how music just stands time. It's not going away, and it comes back around again, and it gets huge. Different genres, different bands. They come back around and go like, "What the heck was that band? Were they like 20 years ago?" Now they're back and they're kicking ass, and it's great. You know what I mean? If you still have it in you, and the people are still accepting it, no matter what you're doing, you know what I mean? It's fun. You know what I mean? If you're doing it with the right people, it's even funner. You know what I mean? So it's great, but there's it's a roller coaster, just like anything else in life, and you just got to go with it. It's a big waiting game. I'm 44, and it's still an internship yet.
I hear you.
So I'm sure you understand in your own way. It's a lifelong internship, no matter if you. It's an internship, period.
It definitely is. Well, thank you so much for taking the time out and doing this with us.
Thank you so much, Jet, at Metal Messiah Radio. Very much.
And we're back, and you're listening to the Metal Magdalene with Jet right here on Metal Messiah Radio. Tonight we have a special tribute to Chuck Schuldiner, whose anniversary of his passing was this Sunday, and we are having some guests that were friends of his and fellow bandmates. And right now we have with us Mr. Terry Butler. Thanks for stopping in tonight, Terry.
Oh, you're welcome.
Now, Terry, having grown up in Florida, you knew the scene well back in the days of Death and beyond. Can you tell us a little bit about what you remember, playing with Chuck in these bands, and what he was like as both a musician and a friend?
Well, one is a friend. He was cool. We got along great. We had a lot of things in common. We loved collecting records. We liked listening to all different types of metal, and we had a great time on the road. As a musician, obviously totally respectful. One of the best musicians I've ever played with. To me, his best attributes was his songwriting. But the Florida scene at the time was amazing in the early 80s, watching everything grow.
And being part of it, too. I mean, now, of course, when you're part of it back then, it's just like, you're having a good time or whatever. Did you ever think in a million years that, death would have left such a mark on the metal world?
No, not at all, because I remember hearing about Mantis, this band from Orlando, and I actually saw Chuck out at this club called Ruby's that we would go to all the time, that the band Naxi Savage would play at. Mm-hmm. And I bought the demo from Chuck, the Mantis demo from him, and I talked to him about, what style it was, and we talked about some of the same music we liked and everything. That's the first time I met him. I didn't talk to him again in person probably for about another 4 years when Rick, Bill, and I hooked up with him for Scream Bloody Gore. Mm-hmm. But I never thought I would ever be part of the scene, mm-hmm. And I never thought I'd be part of Death, because at the time Death went through a bunch of different lineup changes, and Chuck had moved out to San Francisco, and at one point he even quit doing Death and went to Canada, was in Slaughter. So at that stage Death was on and off the radar, but then when he put out Scream Bloody Gore, it became legitimate, and then he moved back to Orlando and had no band, so we kind of rehearsed and all realized that it was gelling. So that's something that I'll always cherish.
Definitely, and just like I said, it's the history of it is amazing, and it doesn't seem like it was that long ago, you know what I mean? Our time just goes by faster when you're getting old, I guess. I don't know, but it's just, and now it's already been 10 years since, the passing of Chuck. what could you tell us a little bit about, any funny little stories or anything when you guys, I mean, you take it for granted. I mean, you live, just like in the moment, never knowing that at any day it could all end.
I know, and, I can't, off the top of my head at the moment, think of one particular story, but, I mean, we were a close-knit unit on the road. I mean, we just were great friends and got along perfect, and I was kind of the clown of the band. I would, do silly little skits and make funny little noises, and I would even make these little skits on cassette tapes with different different voices and stuff, and like Chuck would just lose his mind laughing over that so hard, which I don't know if any of those tapes exist out there anywhere. They probably do, but, we were silly, but, when we needed to be very serious and everything we could, but it was just, he was a really good friend.
Yep, definitely. And like I said, you just never know. I mean, one day you're here, and next day you're not. And, with a lot of people, it's very tragic, I mean, there's, things that you wanted to say to people, whatever. I mean, I think you guys probably got along pretty well. I didn't read any kind of things about you in the tabloids or anything. No,
I mean, Chuck was very serious about his band and music, and I mean, everyone's heard stories in the past about some of his famous tantrums, but it was always usually for the benefit of the band. I mean, if he felt someone from a record label or someone from a magazine or an interviewer did him wrong or his band wrong, that's when he would really get upset. Sure. And everything. So, I mean, most of the stories you hear are just basically him protecting his band,
Sure.
But we got along great. And, I never really had any issues with them.
And you guys were pretty young back then, too, so...
Yeah, I mean, we were, still kind of kids. We're in our early 20s, 21,
sure.
2, and
kids.
No one's perfect, and everyone, some of the choices you make may not have been perfect at the moment, but...
Yeah, but all
just
kids...
part of it, you live and learn,
sure.
and trial by error kind of thing.
And that's a thing, too, you hear all kinds of stories. I'm like, geez, they were freaking kids! What were you like when you were 21? People forget.
I mean, we were one of the few bands playing death metal that were touring and successful. I mean, you had Possessed and Dark Angel and some of the heavier thrash bands at the time, Overkill, these kind of bands, but we were actually touring and making a living at it, and it was very successful. And that's just an attribute to 4 guys all on the same page, working hard for the same thing,
Sure. Now, were you still friends with him or, get to talk to him or anything after you left the band? Did you ever meet up to do any kind of projects or anything like that?
No, I never really got to meet up with him or talk to him that much. Unfortunately, I wasn't. There was a few instances that I was able to talk to him, but there was just too much going on.
Sure.
But he's always in a lot of my thoughts every day, and I talk to him actually all the time. And I think we've worked things out.
I think so.
A few issues from some things that happened, but like I said, we were all young.
Of course.
Some of the choices you make, at the time, you thought were the best for you at that time.
Right, but it's like you said, when you're young, please. Yeah. If we knew then, what we know now, of course things would be different, but it's just part of growing up, and in this business, it's just crazy. Yeah. And, you think if he was alive today, he'd probably still be chugging along in the music scene?
Yeah, I mean, he always, it's like the last couple, his whole thing was always progressing, and like the first 3 albums, all the albums were a slight progression from the one before it, and that's just something consciously he wanted to do, because when we were listening to music, I mean, we would listen to Watchtower, and a lot of the French metal bands that were a little more progressive, and but he still loved punk. I mean, he was big into punk when he was younger, and some of that came through on the first couple records, and but I think he would still be going along, and whether I'm not sure what death would sound like now, but I'm sure it would be pretty technical, and
Sure.
he might not even be singing if it was death, because I think he was kind of trying to get away from that, and
He was, right.
Yeah.
When he did that whole controlled denied thing, he was leaving the vocals to Tim. And
I think that's kind of what he always wanted to kind of do and get away from the death metal vocals. That's why I think I think it's Sound of Perseverance, the last record. Mm-hmm. I think that's the last one. His vocals sound like black metal vocals.
They do a little, right?
But, because after Spiritual Healing, that last tour we did, he was kind of getting tired of the whole death metal thing. Mm-hmm. And, he kind of got rejuvenated a little bit. And then that's, for Human and stuff. But it was a progression, and he was kind of getting away from that.
Right, and he always had different ideas in his head. He was always doing all different things, So
yeah.
Who definitely knows what he would be doing this time around. But, he has left us with some fantastic music, and he is definitely, a legacy, and he's made his mark in the metal music industry. And I want to thank you so much, Terry, for sharing, some of your thoughts and memories with us tonight.
Well, thank you for giving me the opportunity to do that, and hopefully someone listening to this will hear something they haven't heard and take something from that. So.
Yeah, let's hope so, because I'll be playing a lot. Thank you so much, Terry.
Thank you.
Okay, everybody, we're back, and we have with us another guest, Mr. James Murphy. Thank you for taking the time out to stop in with us tonight, James.
No problem, Jet. My pleasure.
Now, James, of course, you were with Death, with Chuck, Terry, and Bill for the release of the whole Spiritual Healing, and you, Chuck, and Terry basically wrote that whole album, right?
We did.
And what was it like recording and writing back then?
Well, the writing was obviously the first thing that I got into when I joined the band, and they didn't really listen to any of my riffs or anything before they picked me. I just sort of kind of did a little impromptu audition at Terry's house, really, with a boombox and a guitar and a little practice amp, and just played for them to the tapes, And then I went back up to Atlanta because I had been living in Atlanta for few months at that time, mm-hmm. And I had come because Chuck had called me, and told me that they had a position available. So,
right.
Just to keep it short and sweet, I wrote down and basically had that little quote unquote audition at Terry's house, but I put onto a boombox, and then they all shook my hand and said, "Yeah, man, sounds great." And, really that's all I did was play along to songs from Leprosy and Scream, and sort of did my own solos in the solo section so that you kind of hear like the idea of what I would be able to add to the band solo wise if I were.
How old were you back then?
Oh man, I don't know, 20 or something. Yeah,
you were kids.
But I was a youngin', like we all were.
Yeah, exactly.
And I was a little bit younger than Chuck. I was closer to like Terry's age, and so we all, they liked my playing. We had a good time just sort of hanging out that day. And then I went back up to Atlanta, and they were already trying to work with somebody else as a replacement for Rick, and so when I came down and did that, it was like, that's the reason why I didn't have a full audition, is because they kind of had this guy.
Uh-huh.
And but it turned out he didn't work out, so Chuck called me back up. It was either Chuck or Terry who called me back. Chuck called me the first time initially, but when I got a call back, I can't remember whether it was Chuck or Terry, and they just said, well, hey, probably Chuck. And they said something along the lines, best I can recall, is, well, hey, that guy, the first replacement for Rick, like they said, that guy didn't work out, so you played great, you've got experience. And they knew I had experience because I had done a tour in Europe as the touring guitarist for a band called Agent Steel.
Sure.
And Chuck had been a fan of Agent Steel. That's actually how I met them, and that's the real story. How I met Chuck was I went to a show in Tampa that was like sort of a Florida show for the Leprosy tour, or perhaps a one-off, but it was during the Leprosy album cycle, and they were supporting Leprosy. I went to the show, and I was wearing one of the Agent Steel shirts from the tour I did, and Chuck spotted it and said, "Cool shirt, introduce. So I use it as an opportunity to introduce myself.
Sure.
And then, of course, in the course of that conversation, then I was, he found out that I had done that tour as a guitarist, and it just led to us having conversations about music and about touring and about different bands that we liked, and we discovered that we both were vinyl collectors and that we liked some of the same kind of obscure European bands, like Sortilege and H-Bomb and stuff like that.
Sure, yeah.
and bands like Satan Jokers and just a variety of bands like that we liked, and so we had mutual interests. And I just remember at that show, which was probably, I don't know, 88? Probably, yeah, it was probably 88. I gave Chuck my number. I was a teenager then, actually. I think I was actually a teenager then. And I gave Chuck my I didn't really have a number, a reliable number, so I gave him my mother's.
There you go.
And, there were no cell phones back then, no internet, so, he called my mom, got my number in Atlanta, where I had moved to try to be in a school, He was going to music school. I went up there to go to a music school, and he called me. And,
cool.
And eventually I came down, and but they had already had that guy by the time I could come down and do that little audition. So that's the reason, like I said, why I did it at Terry's house with a boombox. And so he had to call me back in Atlanta and said, "Okay, you got the job." So I packed up all my stuff and moved back to Florida. Moved in, I think, with my grandmother.
What are some of your memories? About working with Chuck.
Yeah, that was my first experience writing songs with other people. It was so smooth and so copacetic, and so they were so accepting of hearing my ideas and so accepting of trying them out. That taught me a lot about writing with other people, because I had never done it before.
Right.
And also, recording, just going in with a really good work ethic and being real efficient, and being tight and ready, and just getting the stuff recorded well. I learned a lot from that experience.
Right.
Observing and but it was my first serious recording of any type. I had done some home 4-track demos of my stuff, but I had never recorded an album before. So.
Right, and now look at you. You're Mr.
Actually, that experience really sort of lit the bug for me to be a producer as well, and to become an engineer and be a record producer and a mixer. Scott Burns was very inspirational to me in that regard, and working there at the studio with him, and I really liked it. So I got bit by the bug by then, and I started really slow, just studying and paying attention. Just reading everything I could get my hands on, asking questions, paying attention, and starting to get a little bit hands-on. And I remember I really, really, really got bit by the bug when Scott would. He knew I liked to have a couple of hours, an hour or so to work on my solo idea before I recorded it.
Right.
I didn't have anything pre-written really before entering the studio as far as solos go. Some really rough sketches, but I had to sort of nail down what I was actually going to record, and so he taught me how to set up a loop. And just keep shuttling, and it was 2-inch tape back then.
Right.
A big giant controller, the size of a microwave on the stand.
It's changed a lot now. Oh, it's unbelievable, the technology. Now you barely have to sing anymore.
That's you do if you wanted your album to sound good.
Oh, of course.
Not like video game music,
No, it's not MIDI. No.
And I think this is one thing I can say with certainty is I know Chuck and me and Chuck spoke again in about sometime in '99 or 2000. Spoke again, and we had a phone conversation. And I know from speaking to him again, and from starting to talk to everybody in the circle again around that time, that Chuck really just did not like the internet.
All right.
He called it the evil net, and he really didn't like it. And I think in a lot of ways he was right. I think it's brought a lot of good. It's caused a lot of problems.
Right.
Right off the bat, cyberbullying. the decline of album sales, things like that,
Yeah.
that sort of deprive artists of rewards for coming up with fantastic songs,
Absolutely.
Things like that. I think he didn't. I know for a fact he didn't like the internet. He called it the evilness, and I think he would have really hated a lot of the technology like autotune and all that sort of thing. I think he would have hated it,
And I want to thank you so much for taking the time out, James, to do this with us tonight.
Sure, no problem.
And we're back, and on tonight's show, we're having a tribute to Chuck Schuldiner on this, the 14th anniversary of his death. He passed away in December of 2001. And on tonight's show, most of our guests have been from his band Death, but now we have with us Tim Aymar of Control Denied to talk a little bit about his experiences in the band and with Chuck. Welcome to the show, Tim.
Hi, thank you.
So, Tim, tell us a little bit about, how you met Chuck and how you got into Control Denied and all that kind of thing.
Well, it was kind of crazy. I had been working with Jim Dofka, the guitar player, and we put out a demo, a 6-song demo called Virtual Insanity. And we were writing a second album. I was working at a recording studio at the time, so we had free time to record at our leisure. Well, at 3 o'clock in the morning would be fine. But the band kind of fell apart. The drummer left first, and then the bass player left, and so it was just Jim and I there for a while, and we were auditioning people, and even the ones that we really liked, just they were too afraid. There's some killer players that auditioned that they thought they didn't fit in, so they didn't. Right? So Jim said, well, why don't we do this? Why don't we'll look in the papers, the magazines, and we'll see if there's any of the up-and-coming bands, first-tier stars, like, for instance, like Mrs. Rumors. Their singer had passed away, so there was an opening there. And there were bands that were in need of a vocalist and possibly a guitar player. And he said, and if we can't land that, there'll be guys falling out of other bands. That we'll get our tapes out there and put an ad in the papers, and then so he did. And one of the people that got a hold of him was Chuck Schuldiner. And I had been away on a venture. My friend D.C. Cooper sings for Royal Hunt. Recommended me for an album they were doing over in Denmark, Copenhagen, Denmark, at Sweet Silence Studio, where Flemming Rasmussen, the producer, did the Master of Puppets album with Metallica. So I spent about 10 months writing that, all my lyrics and parts, and getting them approved by the producer, and I got over there, and I had pneumonia when I got there. And so I gave up my advance and come home, and I get a call from Jim about 3 or 4 days later, and he says, so you're back? I said, yeah. And he says, guess where you're going now? And I said, what do you got going now? And he says, you're going to Florida, buddy. You're going to sing for Chuck Schuldiner in Death. You're kidding me. I said, I'm not a death metal singer. What the hell are you sending me out there? He says, no. He's not looking for a death metal singer. He's looking for you. And he says, I tried to get the position as a guitar player. He said, this is his second project. He says, it's experimental. He wants to see where it goes. And he's already got a guitar player. I said, okay. So he gave Chuck my number, and he called, and he sent me a package of beforehand, he sent me a package with the demos in it and a note, handwritten note, which I still have.
Oh, nice.
I don't know if it was one of the things that got destroyed, but I do have it scanned. I at least have those things scanned. So, so he sends me a tape. This was back in the day when we still used tapes, and I listened to the stuff, and I'm like, Now his vocals were on it, so it was kind of really hard to tell where it was going to go because he's not the kind of singer I am. What he does is out of necessity. He always wanted a singer that was like a cross between Rob Halford and Ronnie James Dio and Biff Byford and on and on down the line. That kind of singer, a power metal singer, could sing. Oh, and Steven Tyler, of course, who could sing and scream his guts out at the same time. I said, well, yeah, I could definitely do that. He said, yeah, I got your demos. He says, you're the guy. That's the voice I've been hearing in my head the whole time since I started making music. That's the voice I hear, but I can't do it, so I had to invent my own way of singing. So that's really how he got the death metal voice going. And so we talked about a little bit about who our idols were, and what direction he wanted to take with the band. So we go into the recording studio together. Now, I've been a session singer for a long time. I sing anything. I just got one of the last projects that I did was for Jim Dofka. I did a bunch of country covers for a karaoke company. They need a voice on it in case nobody's there to sing. So, I'll sing anything. I just love to sing. And so we get in. I'm on both sides of the mic at this point. I had just earned my wings as a producer that weekend before I flew down there to demos. So, we knocked out those 3 songs in 2 days. So we still had 3 days to hang out. So we finished the bottle of Jim Beam, the Tim Scream. And we were in the kitchen after, he would go back into the studio and he'd remix it, bring it back out, and we'd all listen. And he'd take it back in and remix it again. And he pulls me aside in the kitchen. He says, I'm really happy with the way we get along in the studio and how quick we got things done. And he says, if you want the gig, I'm not even calling Halford. Just about soiled myself. It's like, you said you wanted a singer like Halford. He says, yeah, but he was on the list. I'm not even going to bother calling him back. If you want it. Oh, yeah, put me in, coach.
Nice.
If I could snag that kind of gig,
Yep.
So, that was the beginning. We got through about half of my tracks, and he started complaining about headaches. We had adjoining hotel rooms, and he had. We'd hang out and would go over the stuff we had recorded and what we were about to do, and map things out, and smoke a doob and do a couple shots of Jack Daniels. Hit it, get up in the morning and start pounding coffee, and I'm like, well, yeah, I'm looking at our routine, and yeah, it makes sense that you're having headaches. Why don't we just lay off coffee and lay off the Jack Daniels a bit and smoke a joint with me, and maybe your headache will go away. He says, that's not it, man. He says, this just doesn't feel right. And then he started feeling his left hand. going numb on him while he was doing his solos, which really freaked him out. Mm-hmm. And I said, well, you're a guitar player. You got a, 16-pound hunk of wood hanging off your shoulder there for how many years? Perhaps a lot of guitar players, you probably have a misalignment in your neck. Now, I had a motorcycle accident. What I do is I go to the chiropractor. Try a chiropractor. So he went to a local chiropractor, and he came back and said, yeah, it feels a little bit better, but still don't feel right. And so he tried the chiropractor a little longer, and really wasn't doing anything. Then he went to an acupuncturist, nutritionist. I went back home by then, and I was home for a couple weeks, and I was waiting for a call for us to get back together and rehearse to go on tour. And that's not what happened. I came home and there were probably 20, 25 messages on my answering machine. Remember answering machines with tape on them, right? And, well, the first one was my dad's. My dad's new girlfriend took my mom's. My mom passed away in September before we called. She took my mom's gun and blew her brains out.
Oh, my God.
Yeah. And so, yeah, I freaked out about that. And then Chuck, I had gone to Orlando to party with him for his birthday, but I couldn't find him. And I was calling, and I got back home. There's all these messages, and it really did, he was just like, Tim, call me back. Tim, call me back at this number. Tim, call me back at this number. And it wasn't his number. I didn't know where he was. And finally, the last message, he says, I got to tell you. He says, I'm at Mayo Clinic in New York. They diagnosed a brainstem tumor. Don't worry. They're going to operate. Here's my mom's number. Give her a call. You guys need to lean on each other, and I need you to hold it together and help me get through this. So okay. So that's how I met Jane. And so over the course of the next 2 years, he had the first surgery, and I went out to Philly to meet the folks out at the record company, and talked to him then, and right after his. Well, of course, after he recovered from his surgery, and he was feeling better, and it looked like they got all but a little speck of it, and the chemo ought to take care of that, right? And he was out of the woods for a while. And
it had to be tough for the whole band. I'm sure, when here you are so close to the end, and now the mastermind is... his whole vision and dream, the dreamer is gone, and now you guys are left with his dream.
Right.
So, and it's like you said, it's just like been in limbo. It's kind of sad, but it's kind of like a little legacy kind of hanging there, You know what I'm saying? So, it's like you said, Chuck was going on to this next level. Unfortunately, it was so close. You guys were so close, but it just never came full because shit happened. Like we talked before, shit always happens, Yep. But,
just the shit happening. Shit happens every day.
Yep.
You work through it, and you get over it, and you pick up dust off and move on.
Which you have done, and, the members of the band have done as well. They're all moved on with their lives. And it's just a shame, but I want to thank you for, coming on the show and telling us about your experiences. You've had quite a rich life up to now, Tim.
So far, so good.
So far, so good. And thank you so much for coming on and telling us about, your life with Chuck.
You're welcome, Jed.